because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We take you now back to that eventful day on the Tuolumne River in July of 1969. While not a first descent in the truest sense, this film does depict the beginning of common use of this section of river by paddlers of the Sierra Club's river touring section. On what is believed to be the third such trip down the river, this group of paddlers consisted of Walt Harvest and Jim Sindelar in a two-person canoe, seen here in a slalom race at River Ranch on the Truckee River. Kayakers, India Fleming, just 14 years of age at the time. John Googins, who along with Jim Sindelar filmed this movie. Inveterate playboater Dave Kelsey, whose presence on any trip meant a day of paddling extended to its fullest. Jim Morehouse, then still an engineering grad student at UC Berkeley. And John Ramirez, a newcomer to the sport, seen patching his first boat, one I had sold him the previous winter. With headwaters originating in the High Sierra, the Tuolumne flows west through northern Yosemite and then is impounded in Hetch Hetchy Reservoir. Spring runoff is augmented by flows from Cherry Creek and the Tuolumne South Fork, providing the water for the reach of river depicted in this program. After that brief introduction to the paddlers on that historic day's trip, it's time to move on to the day's action. On the Merrill's Pool to Wards Ferry section of the Tuolumne, the first major rapid encountered is Sunderland's Chute. Walt Harvest and Jim Sindelar, paddling a C2, were the first of our group to tackle that first big rapid. Note that their route takes them right into the teeth of several stopper waves throughout the rapid's length. And pay particular attention to the last big wave near the bottom, as it will present difficulties to some of the paddlers who follow. Now we'll move downstream to another camera location on the river's right side near the bottom runout. Jim Morehouse, seen here, is taking a line just left of center to avoid potential trouble spots.
And then again, some of Jim's less charitable companions might call that the chicken route.
Jim had paddled the same stretch of river just 2 weeks prior to the trip on which this film was made, so he knew by now the best line to take through Sunderland's Chute. India Fleming had quite an exciting float through the rapid. She pulled off 2 combat rolls. The last roll as a result of the bottom stopper wave I mentioned previously. One of the reasons India, who was just 14 years old at the time, was welcome on the trip was her rock-solid roll under difficult circumstances. John Ramirez performs admirably as he takes on the best the river can dish out on his run down through the rapid.
This is Jim Morehouse, me attempting to surf a wave, not quite the right conditions. Notice the duct tape repair on the bottom of my boat.
Next, we catch a brief glimpse of Dave Kelsey's run before switching to the other camera, showing my route through Sunderland's Chute. I too was victimized by the stopper wave I mentioned before, but fortunately was able to recover with a combat roll of my own. Next we'll move down to Hackamack's Hole, the approach of which lies just off the right-hand edge of the screen. It wasn't long after Sunderland's Chute that the group found themselves at the brink of Hackamack's Hole.
The hole is right in river center near the bottom of the rapid, and it has good bouncy bypasses both right and left. John Ramirez is first, goes straight through on the right. Jim Morehouse also chooses right, but he shows off a real snappy eddy turn right beside the hole.
The camera caught me here sneaking down the left bank of Hackamac's Hole, which I did for two reasons. First, having had a pretty wild ride in Sunderland Chute, this kept me out of the big hole. Secondly, 18 miles was going to be a long run, and I was preserving my strength so that I'd still be paddling at the end of the 18th mile.
You can also use the diagonal wave right in the middle of the rapid to turn you toward a left bank eddy.
As Jim Morehouse makes plainly obvious, this little play spot became affectionately known to us as Turkey Turn Eddy and is located a quarter mile or so above Evangelist, which we'll see next. Certainly of little consequence, I'm sure, to the current generation of boaters, even our lead team fell victim to the sharp eddy fences on either side of the river. Luckily, with the river at this high a level well into July, upsets were soon forgotten due to the hot summer sunshine. Although there are several significant rapids below Hackamac's Hole, only once did we stop for filming before arriving at what eventually became known as Evangelist. Are you ready for a little of that old-time religion? This rapid eventually became known to us as Evangelist, so named because India Fleming, upon arriving back home, described this rapid to her father as being very holy. Walt and Jim Morehouse are giving me hand signals indicating how best to run this rapid. I'm about as good at interpreting these signals as I am at reading lips. Thanks but no thanks for the help.
What am I doing boating a river like this in such a cheap life jacket? A hole near the top of Evangelist rips out a D-ring, tears the fabric, and lets the white kapok sack hang out. The original wardrobe malfunction. Then a heavy wave near the bottom finished undressing me.
That's the kind of equipment that we were able to get, so that was rather interesting to see.
At this water level, the Evangelist really is a high water slalom course. Whatever route you choose, there is no straight shot. You will do a fair amount of maneuvering, regardless, simply to either avoid holes and stay in relatively calm water, or to seek them out and have a wilder ride.
In the next 3/4 of a mile below Evangelist, there's not much in the way of excitement by Tuolumne standards. As a sizable side creek entered from the right bank, the river steepened and disappeared into a maze of boulders. We decided it best here to scout along the river's right bank. We discovered at the Clavey River confluence what was for certain the most menacing rapid on this reach of the Tuolumne. Our first impressions were mandatory portage, suicidal on the right, with high likelihood of a vertical pin and a man-eating hole against a cliff on the left. That was enough for most, and some began portaging. Harvest and Sindelar, however, crossed to the left bank to scout that side of the river. Prognosis, in the words of one of the paddlers, "Damn it, it looks runnable." They paddled back to rejoin their companions where Morehouse was donning a wetsuit, or, as Harvest referred to it, a chicken suit, as if Jim might take a shot at it. They tried to sell the idea of a left-to-right drive for an eddy just upstream and to the right of the hole. Then skirt the right-hand edge of the hole and paddle like hell for the run-out. Strong current coming from the right would make it difficult to catch that eddy, but Harvest determined focus and resolve would guarantee success, or so he assured the others. If anything went wrong after entering the top left approach and you didn't make that eddy, you'd be in for one wild ride.
Later, routes through Clavey were found that largely eliminated that tricky ferry, but none ever deliberately challenged that hole. Because of a cliff on the left, rescuing someone in that hole was darn near impossible.
After Clavey, we had worked up our appetites and began thinking about stopping for lunch, so filming would have to wait until later. We chose for our lunch stop that day this abandoned powerhouse.
Hey, there are rocks down there, as John Ramirez is pointing out. Doesn't seem to bother Jim, though. But Dave decides he'd much rather break a leg than a head. Walt plucked this little guy from the river where the swift current must have surprised him. Walt always had a penchant for playing with animals on river trips. Once on the Feather River, his toying with a small rattlesnake put him in a hospital.
Even though Jerry Merrill is seen here, he was not on the trip the day of the lunar landing. Jerry was a PhD candidate at the time and was in Central America conducting research on his doctoral thesis. Jerry was filmed on a trip we made earlier at an obviously higher flow and is surfing the standing waves adjacent to the powerhouse. I believe he was included in this film because he was a key figure in the earliest efforts to protect the Tuolumne.
The powerhouse surfing wave didn't exist at lower water, but at this level it provides a powerful slingshot across from eddy to eddy. A really fun ride.
Jim said to me, when you're headed for the right or the left side of the river, I don't know if our life depends on it, or if you're going over there to play with another one of your damned holes.
As it turned out, we had a few miles to work off our full stomachs before meeting the challenges served up at Gray's Grindstone, a rapid named for Thorne Gray, who was a journalist, historian, and Class 3 open canoeist and covered government and the environment for the Modesto Bee. He wrote many articles for that paper about whitewater boating and the struggle for wild and scenic designation versus the Clavey Wards Ferry Dam proposal. Gray's Grindstone is a living tribute to his memory. In the stretch of river between Gray's Grindstone and Pinball, there are many exciting and challenging rapids. We just did not have sufficient time to film all of them. On the other hand, we were at least fortunate enough to experience Pinball, a rapid which seldom sees the light of day. Enjoy it here now unless you want to wait for another drought to draw Don Pedro's pool down enough to uncover it again. It was close to around 7 p.m. when we got down to Pinball. Some may not recognize this rapid due to the fact that nowadays it is underwater most of the time, owing to the new Don Pedro Reservoir. When the elevation of the pool covers Pinball, this location is often where the transition of water temperature occurs, creating a log jam of considerable density and length. It is a tedious and arduous undertaking, plowing through all the debris, making paddlers wonder whether the river is worth all the effort. I assure you it is worth the effort. As you might notice, several of the paddlers have donned paddle jackets and wetsuits because the sun has slipped below the canyon's rim. The lateness of the hour in part can be attributed to Dave Kelsey's presence on the trip, and you see him here squeezing every last drop of fun out of the river.
Sometimes I not only wore out my companions, I wore out my equipment too. In the 60s, boats and paddles were mostly hand-built in someone's garage. Walt made super paddles, but the shafts were just wooden closet rods shaved down for better feel. And sometimes feel got the better of strength, as you see.
It's a good thing for Dave that the takeout for the run lies just out of sight around the next bend, so he won't have to paddle too far with his makeshift canoe paddle.
Walt was always very worried about product liability. Yeah, right.
When we got to the takeout, we hurried up to the cars and tuned our radios to news reports of the giant leap for mankind. As much as we were excited about that historical event, most of our excitement and chatter had to do with the day's events on the river. We chose for our lunch stop that day this abandoned powerhouse. Historical research indicates this site was once operated by the Tuolumne Electric Company, incorporated in 1903. Harnessing the waters of the Clavey River and Grapevine Creek, they located this facility on the north bank of the main stem of the Tuolumne. In 1905, a steep road was cut down the south side drainage area of Indian Creek. The road's final mile ran alongside the river on a masonry foundation that can still be seen today. Still standing are the stone abutments that supported the cable bridge crossing the river to the powerhouse. The Tuolumne Electric Company began providing electric power northward to the Tuolumne City area mines in 1908. Finally, the transmission lines reached the Groveland area mines to the south in 1911. Tuolumne Electric went bankrupt in 1917, idling the power plant.